Swayam Prabha. Digital India. Educated India.
Yoga Karmasu Kaushalam.
Hello students, my name is Ishan Shanolikar and today I will be talking about the methodology of economics. Let us start with the objectives of this session. First we try and understand and differentiate economic research methods. Then we look at the application of scientific methods to economic analysis. Further, we utilize quantitative tools for economic decision making and try to understand broadly which are the tools being used. Next, we analyze economic behavior using modern methodological approaches where we will see different examples. And finally, we try and critically evaluate economic theories and business applications from the methodological point of view. So, let us start with the introduction to economic methodology. Economic methodology refers to a systematic approach economists use to study economic phenomena or formulate theories and test hypotheses. It encompasses the various tools, techniques and producers that economists employ to understand how economies function. They make predictions and provide policy recommendations. Now, what is economic methodology basically? Economic methodology is a branch of economics that studies the methods and principles used in economic analysis. It addresses fundamental questions such as how do economists construct theories? What are methods used to test economic hypotheses? How do we distinguish between good and bad economic theories? What role do assumptions play in economic models? Now let us move to understanding the importance of methodology in economics. So understanding methodology is crucial particularly for BBA students who are learning economics because it helps evaluate the reliability of economic theories and the models. It provides tools for conducting business analysis and market research. It enables critical thinking about economic policies and their implications. It forms a foundation for advanced economic and business studies. Let us look at the historical development of economic methodology. So, the methodology of economics has evolved over time in a significant manner. If we look at the classical period, which is the 18th and 19th century, mainly emphasis was laid on deductive reasoning and philosophical approach. If we look at the neoclassical era, which is late 19th century and early 20th century, we saw the introduction of mathematical model and marginal analysis. Now, if we focus on the modern period, which is the mid 20th century, we are seeing the integration of statistical methods, which is econometrics, and behavioral insights in the field as well. We will look at all these in detail in some time. Let us look at the scientific method in economics. Economics strives to be a scientific discipline following systematic procedures to develop and test theories. However, the application of scientific methods in economics faces unique challenges due to the nature of economic phenomena. What are the characteristics of scientific method? The scientific method in economics involves first observation, that is, economists observe economic phenomena, patterns and relationships in the real world. Next, hypothesis formation. Based on observations, economists formulate hypotheses and tentative explanations for the economic behavior. Further, theory development. Hypotheses are developed into more comprehensive theories that explain broader economic relationships. Next, testing. Theories are tested using various methods including statistical analysis, case studies and experiments. Further, we move to refinement, where based on the test results, theories are either accepted, modified or rejected. Now let us look at the challenges in applying scientific methods to economics. Economics faces several challenges in following the traditional scientific method. First is controlled experiments. If we look at that, then unlike natural sciences, economists cannot easily conduct controlled experiments due to ethical, practical and the scale considerations. Economic behavior involves human psychology, emotions and social factors that are difficult to predict and control. Economic systems are complex with numerous independent variables, making it difficult to isolate cause and effect relationship. Economic phenomena often unfold over long periods, making immediate verification very difficult. Many economic concepts like utility, welfare, satisfaction are difficult to measure precisely as they are not numerical. Now let us move to a particular method called deductive method. The deductive method, also known as hypothetical co-deductive method, is one of the primary approaches used in economic analysis. It involves reasoning from general principles to specific conclusions. If we look at the process of deductive method, the deductive method follows the following steps. First is the formulation of assumptions. Economists start with certain assumptions about human behavior and economic conditions. For example, the assumption that consumers are rational and seek to maximize utility. Next, development of hypothesis. Based on these assumptions, hypotheses are formulated about how economic agents will behave under specific conditions. Next is logical deduction. Using logical reasoning, economists derive conclusions from the initial assumptions and hypotheses. Fourth is testing and verification. The derived conclusions are tested against real world data to verify their validity. Now let us look at the advantages of this particular method. First is logical consistency, which ensures that conclusions follow logically from the premises. Further, it also provides a structured approach to theory building. Next, if we look at the predictive power, it allows economists to make predictions about future behavior. In terms of policy guidance, it helps in formulating economic policies based on theoretical foundations. However, there are some limitations to this method as well. First is unrealistic assumptions. Often the assumptions on which economists relies are unrealistic and they may not hold in reality. Next is limited scope. This method may not be able to capture the complexity of real world economic situations. Further, it tends to focus on equilibrium states rather than dynamic processes, as it follows a static analysis. Next is cultural bias, where assumptions may reflect particular culture or historical contexts. Now let us move to a new method or a different method, which is called inductive method. The inductive method involves reasoning from specific observations to general principles, which is the inverse of the deductive method. It emphasizes empirical evidence and data collection as the foundation for economic theory. If we look at the process of inductive method, then it follows the following steps. First is observation and data collection. Economists often collect data about specific economic phenomena and behaviors. Next is pattern recognition. Analysis of data to identify patterns, trends and relationships. Next, hypothesis formation. So based on observed patterns, tentative hypotheses are formulated. Further, we move to generalization. If patterns are consistently observed, they are generalized into broader economic principles or laws or theories, as we call them. Further, theory development. These generalizations form the basis of detailed economic theories. What are the advantages of this particular method called inductive method? First is empirical foundation, that is, it is based on real world observation and data. Next, a realistic approach, it reflects actual economic behavior rather than theoretical assumptions. Further, it also possesses flexibility, it can adapt to new evidence and changing conditions. In terms of practical relevance, it is directly applicable in policy making and business decisions. However, there are some limitations to this method as well. Conclusions may not apply beyond the specific context of study. Quality and availability of data can affect the conclusions. The researchers may get confused between correlation and causation. Correlation does not always mean causation, but they may end up saying that. Patterns observed in one period may not hold in another time period. So those are the limitations. Now let us move to a different methodology, that is mathematical and statistical methods. Modern economics heavily relies on mathematical and statistical tools to analyze economic phenomena, test theories and make predictions. So let us look at the mathematical methods in economics first. Economists use mathematical models to represent economic relationships and behaviors. These models help in simplifying complex economic systems, making precise predictions, analyzing policy impacts and optimizing economic decisions. The key tools used are calculus, which is used for optimization problems, marginal analysis and dynamic modeling, linear algebra, where applied input-output analysis is used and econometric modeling also aids. Probability theory, it is used in decision making under uncertainty, and game theory, which is applied to strategic interactions between economic agents. Now we move to the statistical methods in economics, which is also under the branch of econometrics. Econometrics combines different variables, it combines economics and statistics to analyze economic data. The tools used are regression analysis, which is used to identify and quantify relationship between economic variables. Common types include simple linear regression, multiple regression, time series analysis and panel data analysis. Further, statistical methods to test economic theories and hypotheses are also used, which are as follows. So, t-tests are used for individual coefficients, f-tests are used for overall model significance and chi-square tests are used for goodness of fit. Statistical techniques are used to predict future and economic conditions as well, and certain methods in that are moving average, exponential smoothing, ARIMA models and vector autoregressions as well. Now let us look at the applications in business and economics. First is demand estimation, using regression analysis to estimate demand functions and precise elasticity would be very useful for future managers. Statistical methods to analyze market trends, consumer behavior and competitive dynamics are usually the things that BBA students tend to focus on. In terms of risk analysis, probability and statistical methods are used to assess investment risks and portfolio optimization. Econometric techniques are used to evaluate the effectiveness of economic policies. Let us look at the advantages of mathematical and statistical methods. First is precision, that is, it provides exact quantitative relationships. Second, objectivity, it reduces subjectivity bias in analysis. Third is predictive power, it enables accurate forecasting and prediction. Next, policy analysis, where it allows quantitative assessment of policy impacts. However, this method also suffers certain limitations. First is model specification, that is, results completely depend on whether the model is correctly specified or not. Next, it requires large amounts and high volume of very good quality data. Further, we also face assumption sensitivity, results may be sensitive to underlying assumptions. Further, we also face interpretation challenges. Mathematical results may be difficult to interpret, particularly in economic terms. So, that is the idea behind mathematical and statistical methods. Now, let us move to a methodology in the modern scenario, that is experimental economics. Experimental economics involves conducting controlled to test economic theories and understand economic behavior. Let us look at the type of economic experiments. First is laboratory experiment. Controlled experiments conducted in lab settings with human subjects, such as market experiments, auction, public goods, and so on. If we look at the field experiments, then these are experiments conducted in real world settings. These include randomized controlled trials or RCTs, natural experiments, or quasi experiments. Further, we also have computer simulations. The use of computer models to simulate economic systems and test theories is also done. This includes agent based modeling, Monte Carlo simulations, and computational general equilibrium models. Let us understand the methodology of experimental economics. First is experimental design, that is clear hypothesis formulation, control and treatment groups are defined, randomization is taken care of, and replication is also looked at. If we look at subject selection, then it requires representative sampling, incentive compatibility, and ethical considerations as well. In terms of data collection and analysis, we need careful measurement of outcomes, statistical analysis of the results, and robustness checks as well. Let us understand the advantages of this particular method. First, it can establish causal relationships more clearly than observational studies. Next, it has the ability to control for confounding or confusing factors. Experiments can be repeated to verify results via replication. Direct testing of theoretical predictions is also possible. However, there are some limitations as well. First is external validity. Results may not generalize to the real world settings. Next, artificial environment. Laboratory settings may not reflect the actual or natural behavior. Third is scale limitation. It is difficult to replicate a large scale economic phenomena again and again to verify results. Further, if we look at cost and time, the experiments can be expensive and time consuming. Now let us move to a relatively newer methodology, that is behavioral economics methodology. Behavioral economics incorporates insights from psychology and other social sciences to understand economic decision making. The key concepts include bounded rationality, where recognition that human decision making is limited by cognitive abilities, available information, and time considered. Cognitive biases include systematic errors in thinking that affect economic decision making. These include anchoring bias, confirmation bias, availability heuristic, or overconfidence bias. We also use prospect theory in behavioral economics, that is alternative to expected utility theory that better explains decision making under risk and uncertainty. The next concept is mental accounting, which tells us how people categorize and treat money differently based on its source and its intended use. If we look at the methodological approaches in this particular method, then we have lab experiments where controlled studies to test behavioral hypotheses and measure cognitive biases are conducted. Under field studies, we have observational studies of real world economic behavior. There is also a branch called neuroeconomics, which uses brain imaging and other neuroscience techniques to understand the neural biases of economic decision making. In terms of survey research, large scale surveys are conducted to understand and study the attitudes of people, preferences, and decision making patterns. If we look at the limitations and criticisms of this methodology, then we have, despite the scientific aspirations, economic methodology faces several important limitations and criticisms. So broadly, methodological limitations include the ceteris paribus assumption, that is the assumption that all other things remain equal or constant is often unrealistic in complex economic systems where multiple variables change simultaneously. In terms of equilibrium bias, many economic models assume markets reach equilibrium, but real markets may be in constant disequilibrium and a dynamic process. Next, we have aggregation problem. Moving from individual behavior to aggregate outcomes can lead to fallacies of composition. Many economic models are static and don't adequately capture dynamic processes and time dependent relationships. Looking at the data and measurement issues, economic data is often incomplete, delayed, or subject to revision. It is difficult to measure important economic concepts like utility, welfare, and economic well-being. Available data may not be representative of the population or phenomena being studied. Analysis may focus only on successful cases, ignoring the failures and giving us inconsiderable results. Looking at the philosophical criticisms, then methodological individualism, it tells that criticisms that economics focuses too much on individual behavior and ignores social and institutional factors. This was brought up by Karl Menger from the Austrian School of Economic Thought. Next is reductionism, criticism that economic models oversimplify complex social phenomena. Universalism considers the question of whether economic laws are universal or culturally and historically specific. In terms of practical limitations, we have prediction failures, where economics has had limited success in predicting major economic events like financial crisis, policy, so on. In terms of policy effectiveness, mixed record of economic policies based on theoretical models is observed. Difficulty in choosing among competing economic models and theory is often faced. There is a gap between academic economic research and public understanding. If we look at the responses and improvements, then first we have methodological pluralism, that is recognition that different methods may be appropriate for different economic questions. We move to an interdisciplinary approach, which is being seen quite much in the current scenario. Further, we also include big data and machine learning, which are new methods to identify patterns. In terms of experimental validation, there is increased use of experiments to test economic theories. Now let us look at the summary and key takeaway of this. Economic methodology encompasses broadly the various approaches and techniques economists use to study economic phenomena. Understanding these is crucial particularly for BBA students, as they provide the foundation for economic analysis and business decision making, which will help them in their career as managers and as future company owners. I hope you understood the session and enjoyed the session too. Thank you so much.